For those of you that don't know me, I am Amy Jacobs, Commissioner at Bright from the Start, Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning, and I'm also a member of the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education Board. And I am very honored to welcome you here to this Critical Issues Forum on Early Learning, which is obviously near and dear to our hearts at the department. We consider ourselves the Birth Through 5 Early Education Agency. So quality early education is of utmost importance to us. We know that it's important because 85% of brain development occurs between 0 and 3 years of age. And those little ones, when their brains are like sponges, are making over 700 new neuron connections every second. So laying that critical quality early education foundation is so important to our children and to their future success. But it's also an industry. Early education is an industry. It's an industry to the communities and to the state, as those early education programs provide jobs, but it's also an industry to the rest of the state, as those early education programs provide places for those children to go so that those parents can work if they so choose to. So it is a huge economic industry for our state. We are actually conducting an economic impact study now, which we'll release the results of that this summer, and we will be happy to share that with you, and we'll partner with the partnership as we work our way around the state to talk about that. Because early education is so important to us and we license over 5,500 child care centers throughout the state, our latest initiative and one of our priorities is our quality rated system, which is our tiered quality rating and improvement system. It allows child care centers throughout the state to assess, improve, and communicate the level of quality above and beyond our health and safety guidelines that really looks at the early education components of their program. They can score a 1, 2, or 3 star, so it's a good indication for parents as they're out looking for child care to look for those stars to see where the quality of the programs are as they make those decisions for their children. I am very excited as we look at this issue today, and I'm excited to see this program, which has an excellent reputation firsthand, and I will join you on the tour so that we can see firsthand what's going on today with these little minds. But now I will turn it over to Steve Dollinger for his President's Report.
Hey, good morning. It's a pleasure to be back at Drew. I say to be back. If those of you with us for a number of decades, some of you are too young to have been with us that long, but we've been here a couple of times on our old bus trips across Georgia because this is a special place to visit. And it's nice to be able to cycle back. And Amy, thank you. It's a pleasure having you on our board. It's nice keeping that relationship with the whole part of that birth to work pipeline, we call it, and having the commissioner for DECAL on our board just solidifies that early beginning. Let me walk you through the notebook you have, just make sure you understand what all is in there. And most of your information is on the right side. Of course, if you have the agenda and you see how that's going to flow, we'll have Donita McCain come up in just a few minutes to kind of kick this off for us. Then a real interesting panel. And as Amy alluded then, we'll have an opportunity to tour this facility if you can stay with us, and then come back at the end and have a Q&A to kind of debrief what you saw and any questions that may have come to your mind while you were walking around. Behind the agenda then are the bios for all of our speakers. We'll just introduce them briefly as they come up to speak or to be at the panel, but you can read their bios in detail as you get a chance this morning or even later. Behind that is an article that Dr. Dana Rickman wrote for the James Magazine. We are really happy that just about every publication, they invite us to do an article, and it's usually something that we try to make sure is timely for that episode, and realizing that we were partnering with DECAL to work with some of their early learning zones across the state, what a timely article it could be to have business leaders across the metro area looking at that same kind of topic. So that's what that little article is. Then a couple of handouts that we like. If you want a lot of information on this topic, we had some of our top 10 issues back on the back table, and they're not in priority order, you know that. But the 6th one from last year was about this very topic. So if you want more in-depth information, you can pick up a hard copy or go online to get a copy. But there are a couple of short pieces that if you really are excited about this, want some more data pieces at hand, There's one that Comer Yates and his team over at the Atlanta Speech School did that gives some pretty good information, front and back. And then the next piece is from Pat Willis with Voices for Georgia's Children. It's 4 pages, but a lot of good data points and information if you're trying to explain the importance of this topic to some of your friends or your colleagues back in the office. Feel free to use those materials and share them as you'd like. Then last is a list of attendees. You may remember several years ago we would have everyone stand and give their name and their organization, their title. And while that was really interesting, it took a long time. And of course, some people would take that opportunity to do a little cameo about their work or the transition of their life or whatever they were doing. So one of our past chairs said, you know, why don't we just give that information to people so you can see who's here. And if it's like, oh, yeah, I want to see her or him to do a little networking, you can do that as you tour the school also. So that's some of the big pieces of information. Would also like to mention that our next Education Policy Fellows class registration process is going to be starting in the next few weeks. So I ask you to be on the lookout for that information. This class has their last class next month and then the graduation. In fact, the last class is going to be interesting. We have the chair and some of the members of the Governor's Education Commission coming to talk about that work and how big that's going to be for us in the fall when we hear their recommendations. Our Education Policy Fellows class is similar to what you may be familiar with some of the chamber classes, except it's all ed policy. We meet once a month for 9 months. We have an overnight retreat. The class just came back from D.C. There are about 12 or 14 states that have an Education Policy Fellow class. So they all go to D.C. Once a year. And we put a spin on that different than some other states just because we're fortunate to have a lot of friends in D.C., not just our congressmen. One year it'll be John Lewis. Another year it could be Johnny Isaacson, who meet with the class for a period of time. Of course, a lot of the other aides. But what's really fun beyond that is meeting with some of our national policy leaders, like the U.S. Chamber and other groups that are right there in D.C. Then they can come to our class members. Dana leads that group, and we'll find some room at the Capitol and be able to hold up there for a day when that's part of the conference time. Other parts of the conference would be typical speakers and breakout sessions, but they just came back from that, and again, it was another one of those invigorating policy experiences if you really get into this. So if you like ed policy, look for our application and please join us. We typically have a class of about 20 people, and like this group today, like us, it's business, government, education, foundation, community leaders. So think about that and join our class. Today's program is going to be being recorded. It'll be on our website within the next couple of days. So again, if any of your friends or colleagues were saying, gosh, I wish I could have been there, well, they can at least see the information and enjoy that later on. Maybe popcorn and a beverage would make it a little more tolerable if you want to do that at some other time of the day. Okay, let's get into the program. I'm excited to introduce another one of our board members. Donita McCain is with PNC Bank. And it's so appropriate that PNC be represented here because early learning has long been a big focus of theirs. A lot of our legislators and some business leaders realize that the beginning part of that birth to work pipeline is important, but it's a long-term ROI, as they say in the business community, return on investment. So it's difficult to put investment in time and money here and wait so long for the payoff. But you can read from some of the publications I just shared with you. You can read in our top 10, and I'm sure you'll hear from Donita now, that's certainly the place to invest our time and money to get that started. But what's interesting to us, we've long been supportive of early learning, but it's interesting now, it's not just jump-starting that early part of the pipeline, the return on investment for the investment in these little kids and their minds, but there are other facets of that now that are really coming to light. It also enables many of our employees to get work because they can have that child care. And of course, now we want quality rated child care. It's not just that. As we start new early learning centers across the state, we're creating jobs. So it's a job growth and workforce development piece. So as we have said over and over again in our Economics of Education publication, which you can also get online, is a good education, is good workforce development, is good economic development. So with that, Donnie McCain, come on to the podium. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So good morning, everyone. I am Donita McCain, Regional Underwriting Executive with PNC Southeastern Markets. I'm pleased to have been invited to have an opportunity to speak with you today about a couple of issues, specifically, and Steve pointed to one of them, and that is why a corporation like PNC is interested in early education, what's the business case for early education, and third, to talk a little bit about how we have collaborated locally with institutions to support the communities in which we work and live. And so with that, but before I jump into that, I'll share a little bit about myself. I believe my life can be easily divided into two main categories, which is probably not uncommon with many of you, and that's work and family. At work, I'm charged with leading a team of credit professionals who analyze data, assess risk, and structure credit solutions for corporations in and around the Atlanta area and throughout the Southeast. At home, I co-lead a team of individuals, specifically a 19-year-old who's at Lehigh University now, a 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old. And I remember with that 19-year-old, when we first had him, as all eager parents are, we were just so absorbed with him. We were watching him every day, looking at how he turned, you know, what little thing he would do each and every day. And so we were amazed at how amazed he was at learning different things, even after 5 days and after 30 days. And I remember my husband and I spending a lot of time with him, just educating him and exposing him to things, and we were just amazed at what he learned. And so we were, you know, when he entered kindergarten, we were for certain that, you know, this little boy probably will get advanced to first grade because he is brilliant. And it just was amazing what he learned. And what I'd learned is that when we got to kindergarten and, you know, chatting with other parents and chatting with teachers, is that my child was, you know, was not as unique as I thought he was going to be. There were several kids there who, you know, could read a few words. And I was like, goodness gracious, you know. So I share that to say that what if I didn't have the resources, didn't have the knowledge, or just wasn't inspired or just too tired to think of doing that? My child could have very easily been 18 months behind those other kids that was normal. And so I think that's why many of us are here today. And so I'm excited to have the opportunity to speak with, talk to, have a dialogue with individuals who are as excited about early education as I was with my 19-year-old. So with that, I'll start with, you know, of all the worthy causes, why early education? You know, PNC could have put their dollars in any number of initiatives. So why early education? And the answer to that is, back in 2002, our former chairman and CEO, Jim Rohr, asked the question, what if we harness the power of our brand and our organization to support a single issue? Because we were supporting several issues. But what if we harness our power to support a single issue? Can we make a greater difference in the communities that we serve? And so after some extensive research and input from employees, a decision was made to invest in pre-K education. With that decision, PNC in 2004 launched what we call our Grow Up Great initiative. And Grow Up Great is a $350 million multi-year initiative targeted at kids from the ages of birth to age 5 with the goal of exposing them to art, science, math, to create a better and more success, to create a greater opportunity for success in school and in life. Another couple of reasons why early education was so critically important to PNC. Not only did Jim Rohr come up with the idea, but there was also plenty of research that said that when we invest in education, we reduce the levels of poverty, we reduce crime, and we increase a child's chance of success in school and in life. We also heard, as I mentioned, that from our employees. And at that time, we probably had today we have over 50,000. At that time, we might have had 20 or 25,000. But there was overwhelming evidence from employees and through surveys that the single biggest issue facing the workforce and what the workforce in and around PNC was early childhood education and access to it. So once again, hearing from employees made that a very critical initiative for PNC. We know that a child who enters kindergarten ready to learn is more likely to do well in school, graduate on time, go on to higher learning, obtain a meaningful job, and contribute to the community. And therefore, that to me and to PNC is the business case for investing in early education. To the extent that we are prepared to invest our dollars, and many of you are supporting initiative to invest dollars in early education, we reduce the rates of dropout, we increase a child's opportunity for success, once again, in school and in life. Investing now can help ensure that more and more disadvantaged children have the tools they need to succeed, and if they can do well in school, we can minimize the income disparities that we know exist in our society that influences a child's success and the lack of trust in the American dream. So that speaks a little bit to the business case for the investment in quality education. What we ultimately hope to see PNC in terms of returns is higher earnings, an improved labor pool, and a better educated workforce. Once again, I've attended a number of these sessions, and we talk a lot about STEM, and PNC is a financial services industry. So we're not necessarily looking for high-tech individuals or individuals with advanced degrees in the science and the math areas. However, Steve spoke to it a little bit. We are looking for a more engaged workforce. We are looking for a qualified labor pool to come in that we can either train in some of the things we're doing, and the initiative that we've taken around Grow Up Great, and some of the things we're doing here today helps to position us for that. So that leads us to, once again, investing in early education. Some of the things, so I spoke a little bit about why PNC chose early learning, spoke a little bit about the business case, why other corporations should consider early learning. Once again, a more advanced labor pool, reduced time off from our employees, a more engaged workforce. Those are some of the business initiatives long-term that we'll see. Once again, not today, but definitely long-term. But lastly, how have PNC partnered with organizations throughout its footprint to make this a success? In 2012, PNC entered the Atlanta market with this acquisition of RBC Bank. And with that entry, we partnered with three local organizations that we view as experts in early learning. Those organizations are the Fernbank Museum, Sheltering Arms, and the Woodruff Art Center. With those partnerships, we invested over $1 million or committed over $1 million in a multi-year grant to help those organizations ensure that kids have access to the arts, the science, the maths, and other initiatives to develop or help prepare them for success in early learning. One of the other things that we've done around early education is volunteerism. PNC's employees are paid, have access to, or PNC is willing to actually pay or allow us up to 40 hours of paid, paid time to volunteer with organizations around the Grow Up Great. Over the last, since our inception, the PNC employees have volunteered over 42,000 hours, 42,000 employees, I'm sorry, and over 485,000 hours towards our initiatives. So those are things, once again, that increases employee engagement, and actually their commitment to PNC. And it's just the right thing to do, and it definitely helps with our organizations here locally. So in closing, I would just share one of the things that I've done through my partnership with through participating on the board with the GPEE. I've learned so much more about education and all the many organizations that are committed to education. And so what I've done is taken that knowledge, shared it with coworkers, parents, and others. And I would encourage each of you to take the knowledge that we learned today, and whether we tweet, blog, text, or put pen to paper, to make sure we're sharing the news, the good news about what we're doing in Georgia around early education, and some of the things we can continue to do to make sure we're creating success for our youth. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Donita. I love hearing the business voice talk about these issues that we're so passionate about. To hear Donita talk about building their brand and doing that through Grow Up Great, talking about listening to and supporting their employees, and then investing in and supporting their community. For the same reasons we were talking about, the same data points and outcomes we realize we can gain from our children, but you can hear that from other voices in addition to educators and providers and service agencies, but also our business community. So now, as we get into the panel, before I do that, let me just say there was one piece of paper in your packet I went over too quickly, and that is if you want to join our distribution list, you can fill out this piece of paper and leave it with us. That will put you on distribution list for our publications, for our blasts, our policy information, and things like that, announcements of these kinds of meetings. So if you'd like to be on that list, let us know. So now, I'll invite our Director of Policy and Research, Dana Rickman, Dr. Dana Rickman, to come up to the podium, and our panel members, if they'll come back up, please. Dana writes the top 10 issues to watch. She leads that education policy class I talked about, and then she does our moderation whenever we need a good moderator. So here's Dr. Dana Rickman.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm really happy to see so many engaged faces in the audience. And so I'm hoping that it's the subject matter and not like myself, you've had way too much coffee, and so you're just really happy to be here. But again, thank you very much for coming. You know, Georgia's had a long commitment to early learning, and based on the strength of the Georgia Pre-K program, as a state, we're really seen as a national leader. But there's really a lot going on in early learning in Georgia, in addition to our excellent pre-K program. And I think by now we all know the research, especially all of us in this room that are interested in this, of the impact of children who participate in high-quality early learning, less likely to drop out, all of these things, less likely to be retained. But one thing that we really don't discuss very much, which has already been mentioned by Commissioner Jacobs and Steve, is the economic impact, the real economic impact in current day on the community and economic development. There was a research study done in 2007 that showed that the child care industry in Georgia created over $4.1 billion in annual revenues. That's like, oh boy, that's a lot of money. And that study was done in 2007, and that study is being updated as we speak. And so we're really excited to hear what that new information is going to be, and that is going to be released this summer. So with our panel today, we're going to dive a bit deeper into what Georgia's doing at the state and local level, not only to continue to prove the outcomes for kids, because that's really why we're here, to our future generations, but also about the economic engine that really powers Georgia. And so without further ado, I want to introduce my panel. At the far end of my panel, we have Kristen Bernhardt, who's the Deputy Commissioner for System Reform at Bright from the Start, Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning. Next to Kristen, we have Clayton Adams, Community Coordinator for the Clark County Early Education Empowerment Zone. We have Nicole Tuttle from Drew Charter Schools, Literacy Coach. And of course, we have Donita McCain with PNC. So I'm going to kick it off with Kristen. I'm going to go to you first. From the state perspective, what's being done to increase both quality and quantity of early learning opportunities for our youngest learners?
Sure, thank you. Well, I think as Commissioner Jacobs already alluded to, quality rated is really our primary thrust right now to really look at how we can increase and improve and communicate the level of quality that we have available in childcare around the state. That economic impact study that's already been referenced told us the last time we did it that about 30% of all children under the age of 3 in Georgia were in some form of licensed childcare in the state. And when you brought that up to 4 years of age, that got closer to 80%. So we know children who are experiencing this huge amount of brain growth and development and establishing these neural pathways that are going to provide the foundation for their later lifelong success are out in childcare. So what can we do to help increase the quality that's there and help parents make smarter and more informed decisions? Georgia's work around Quality Rated, which is that 3-star rating program for child care providers that go above and beyond basic health and safety requirements, really received an extra boost in 2013 when Georgia won a Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant, which really set our standards much higher and put the goal in front of us that we would really like to achieve 100% participation in Quality Rated by the end of the grant period. So that is a huge piece that we're working on now. Part of the Early Learning Challenge also was establishing these early education empowerment zones, which was a way where, on top of this state-level infrastructure that we're building to support higher quality, looking at some local, regional investments that we could do to see what we could learn from the great work that's already happening at a site-based level. And I think Clayton will probably talk about that a little bit more, about some of our investments in Clark County and the partnerships we're building there, which are going to look at both about making investments to increase the quality of care that's available, but also some unique partnerships with our Department of Community Affairs and Department of Economic Development to encourage high-quality child care providers to open in some of these areas.
Clayton, can you describe what's playing out in Athens?
Absolutely. So with the E3Zs, there's 4 areas in the state. We have Clark County, we have Bibb County, and we have a region of 5 counties in northwest Georgia as well as south Georgia. So in Clark County, when we were chosen, it was based upon quantitative data that showed, of course, that these 4 zones needed higher quality care and access for our families to this quality care. So one of the things we've been working on with the department, with Community Affairs, is making a resource guide. And this resource guide is going to be for businesses as well as our child care providers in Clark County that will show the different tax incentives and loans that are possibly available for these. We are also working under the Challenge Grant. Is within E3Zs, we are hoping to have 10 different new or expanded child care centers. In Clark County, we'll have 2 of these centers, and these centers will, of course, provide jobs. And these centers will also be of the highest quality. Within a year, these will be 3-star centers. So we're also, in Clark County, we of course have the advantage of having the University of Georgia. And at the university, there's a small business development center. And we already have the partnership and working closely with them as they work and support the small businesses as well as our child care providers in Clark County.
So that's very exciting about from the business standpoint. And I know I've been standing here saying let's talk about business and economic development and engagement. But Clayton, I want to flip that a little bit from the parents in Clark County. What does this mean for them, and how do they understand how to ask for quality?
Well, as we've already heard before, Quality Rated. To get the word out on Quality Rated, we've been working with, in Clark County, our quality care and children, our local resource and referrals. We have a foundation, a wonderful foundation in Clark County called the Nancy Travis Foundation, which works with child care providers to get them quality rated, to get the word out. And when the word gets out within the providers to be quality rated, to make that step, the parents will come along. Now, of course, that's the challenge. You know, we all know in this room, and our colleagues and our families know the importance of quality and the importance of early childhood. But that may not be the case for a lot of our families, especially, you know, within the E3Z, we are working with high needs families. You know, Clark County, as many of you know, has the third highest poverty rate in the nation with a town of its size of 100,000 people. So we had to get the word out. And we do that by having quality rated and having our centers be of quality. And also, what is quality?
Right.
You know, what does that look like? A lot of our families, they don't know what that looks like. They don't know how to ask for it. They've never been asked. You know, a lot of these families, you know, what does quality look like to you? So to understand to have a high expectation and to understand the importance of quality care within our community is of the utmost importance, and that's why we're here, and the importance of quality rated, and to getting that word out and to getting everyone on board, businesses, providers, public schools, private schools, everybody in Clark County and all throughout the state on board, and with that, it's just word of mouth. You know, it's amazing that in 2015, that word of mouth still drives, especially in early childhood education with families. I see it every day. So getting the word out there, getting quality out there, and what it looks like.
Okay. Nicole, I want to jump to you. We've heard a little bit from both Kristen and Clayton about the Early Learning Challenge grant and what's going on in Athens. Take us a little bit to where we are here. This neighborhood didn't always look like this. And so could you give us a little bit of context to the experiences of the families who live here and the Eastlake community and how it's come to where we are now?
Absolutely. There's been significant transformation in our neighborhood over the last 20 years. And the Eastlake community has looked at this transformation in a different way. And instead of focusing its energy in one specific area, such as housing or education, we've looked at a multidimensional approach where we focused on education, housing, and community wellness through various partnerships. And this model is being shared through our sister organization, a nonprofit called Purpose Built Communities. So when you talk about housing, you'll see surrounding the YMCA here, we have the Villages of Eastlake. And that was built to replace a housing project called the Meadows that was in desperate need of help. So it is a mixed income housing community. 50% of the apartments are public housing and 50% are market rate. And then, of course, what we're all talking about here today is the education piece. And from the start, the community realized that early education was so vital. So when Drew Charter School opened up, in 2001, it was in conjunction with a Sheltering Arms, which is located right here at the Villages of Eastlake and serves 135 children from the ages of birth to 3 years old. And even with that great partnership, we were still finding that our kindergartners were not ready for school. And so Drew opened up their first pre-K in 2007 with one class. We now have 4 pre-K classes on our campus. And that made a tremendous difference, and we were really seeing the difference, and we were seeing how this cradle to college pipeline was working. But again, it still just wasn't enough. The neighborhood could not be served simply by Sheltering Arms. So in 2011, through a partnership with the Eastlake Y, where we are right now, we opened the Early Learning Academy. So now we have 320, we serve 320 students between Drew, the Eastlake Early Learning Academy, and Sheltering Arms in this neighborhood. And we're finding that through this cradle to college pipeline that kids are coming into kindergarten ready to learn to read, and then getting to 3rd grade ready to reading to learn.
Thank you for that. And so more specifically, sort of with your work here, literacy improvement has driven a lot of the successes that we've seen at Drew. Can you talk a little bit about those strategies, and in particular, which ones are transferable to other pre-K centers, other areas of the state?
We're doing a lot of work at Drew trying to share our best practices. Right now, we're actually involved in a dissemination grant with our community schools to try to share those practices and show that this is something that can be done in a traditional public school. And I think what we've come back to time and time again at Drew about what really makes this work is high quality teachers. And that is within Sheltering Arms, our Early Learning Academy, as well as our school. And not just in early learning, but of course all the way up the pipeline. Drew spends a lot of time and resources attracting the best of the best. And it kind of goes a step further than that, because we want to provide ongoing professional development to our teachers. So through our partnership with the Rollins Center at the Atlantic Speech School, our teachers receive ongoing professional development and coaching. So it's not we get them in the classroom, we tell them what we want, and then we leave them to do it. We make sure that we're in there seeing what's going on, providing support where it's needed, and really being visible and providing that help that they need. And then in addition to that, partnerships. We couldn't do it all alone. So our partnerships with the YMCA, with Sheltering Arms, and like I mentioned previously with the Rollins Center are so important. And what we've found through the work that we're doing in the community is that it can be replicated. It just takes looking at education in a different way. I come from a traditional public school, and being in a charter school has always, it's just been fascinating to me that we can make things happen quickly, and we can make the changes that are necessary for our students if we just step outside the box a little bit.
Donita, I want to follow up with you. We've heard actually from all three panelists now keep talking about the importance of partnerships, that we're not just having a school all on its own. Suddenly kids are learning like they never did before. And community engagement, parent engagement, all of these partnerships and bringing everybody together. Can you talk about PNC in particular, but corporations in general? How do they get involved in this work and become one of those trusted partners to help in this?
As one of the things we talked about, it's with the Grow Up Great initiative. We have defined partnerships with the Woodruff Arts Center's Fern Bank and Sheltering Arms, where we actually go in and not only our employees, but we encourage others in the communities and those that we touch to go in and do some volunteering. We also partner with those organizations with, we have an initiative called today, Words Everywhere, where we have created English and bilingual kits that we've given out to over 500 students within those organizations here in Atlanta, with the goal of actually introducing over 3,000 words to them over the next 18 to 24 months. So it's a very nice initiative. But in addition to those organizations, we've partnered with the mayor in its summer reading program. We partnered with Gears, and we actually just recently partnered with the Vaughn City English Avenue communities with a $1 million Spread the Word grant. So once again, our reach is hopefully to reach over 6,000 students or kids with that program, and once again, introducing over 500 words to them. Thanks.
Right. And I have a sort of a final question that I want to throw out to the entire panel so you guys can wrestle each other for the microphones. With all that we have already learned with the Drew experience, and what we will be learning and will continue to learn with the E3Z zones, how are we going to scale this? How are we going to take this across Georgia so it's not just pockets of excellence here and there? I know, Kristen, if you have some ideas to start there, and then the rest of the panel.
Definitely. I think one of the really exciting things in Georgia right now around early learning is that we are looking at building state-level systems to support this work. So we have this great opportunity to look at pilot programs and look at community partnerships and see what we can learn from them, but approaching it with a real systems perspective. So these aren't isolated incidences of success that happen because of happenstance, but they're situations that we're approaching intentionally to learn from with the intention to scale. I think that, to me, is, again, what's kind of exciting about all of this is that how does it all fit into the bigger framework about, you know, what are our policymakers' goals for education, what are our long-term education goals, and how do we find those bright spots as part of this bigger picture. So I think the early education empowerment zones, from DECAL's perspective, is that this was a chance to look at a portion of this big grant that we received to see what we could do to learn from local communities so that they could inform our bigger systems perspective. So I think that's a great way the state is moving about early learning right now, is just that eye of intentionality, the eye of how does this fit into a bigger policy framework, and how do we move away from isolation and into scale in general.
Others like to answer? How are we scaling?
One thing that I would want to mention is the Rollins Center's online Cox campus. There are modules available for free for educators to go to look at some of the amazing strategies that are being utilized in some of these top centers, some of which you'll get to see today at Drew. But the fact that this is free and available to anyone is important, because that professional development is just so key to the success of these centers.
And another thing that we talk about a lot is we're here to stay. This is not, early education is not just a hot issue that's going to come and go. I mean, the data, the research, it's all there. And you know, what we're doing in E3Z at the end of 2017, when my job is finished, the sustainability is going to be there. It's going to last, and what we've done is going to last. And with something like quality rated, you know, a lot of people, when I go out and talk with providers who may be on the fence of becoming quality rated and going through the program, they'll just say, oh, well, this program's going to come and go. Well, no, it's not. I mean, this is a federal program. I mean, quality rated, in each state it may be called something different, but there are over 30 states who are on board. This is a national issue that's not going anywhere anytime soon.
I would just add and agree with Clayton that this is a national issue, and once again, obviously, I know a lot about PNC, but we have in our 19 state footprint, we have this program and have invested like dollars, and actually a lot more, just because we've been in those markets a lot more. We've also advocated at both the state and federal level. Our former chairman and CEO, Jim Rohr, sits on several advisory committees at the federal level, speaking to the importance of this issue. So, as Clayton said, this isn't going away. This isn't unique to Georgia. This isn't unique to PNC. This matters to all of us. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Now, you guys have been incredibly patient and indulgent as I got to ask all of my questions. So now that I'm satisfied, I'd like to open it up to the audience to pose some questions to our panelists as well. We have a microphone circulating, so if you just want to catch the eye of either Diane or Steve. There must be some. It's not like the mic's coming.
Kristen, I'd like to have you give us a brief overview of what 1 star means, 2 stars.
Sure. So that's in reference to quality rated, which is, again, our tiered quality rating and improvement center program for child care providers. So there's a 3-star system, so 1, 2, and 3 stars. And the way we look at it is the way child care providers are rated is they submit a portfolio, which is evidence of their practices, what they say they're doing every day. So what does the training and education level of the teachers look like in that room? What are the ratios like? What kind of specialized training have they had in early childhood development? Are they using best practices that are aligned with our early learning and development standards? Sometimes people raise your eyes and you start looking at assessment for young children, but once you realize we're not talking about Scantron number 2 pencils for 2-year-olds, but we're talking about how do you check in to make sure that those children are moving across that developmentally appropriate trajectory that's going to make sure they show up for kindergarten ready to succeed. So that's all information that they submit to us electronically. It's documentation. So that's what a child care provider says they're doing. But the big thrust of where the rating comes from is an on-site observation that's done unannounced, where we send assessors who are trained to reliability on a national instrument of quality called the Environment Rating Scale, which is a system that many states have used to assess the quality in child care programs. And we don't tell a child care center or a family provider when we're coming, we just show up. And we spend about 4 hours in a third of the classrooms in each age group. So if you've ever been in a position where you're shopping for childcare for your own children, you probably spent a lot of time, asked a lot of questions, but I'm going to guess that no one spent 4 hours in a third of every classroom that's there. And so these assessors are looking at all these best practices of quality, looking for things like the child-teacher interactions, the child-child interactions. Now, you could have all the pretty books in the world, but if the children don't have access to them throughout the day and the books aren't a part of instruction, it doesn't matter how pretty that shelf looks with the great tools and resources that are there. Same things for toys. For infants, we need to make sure that they're being engaged with all these great manipulatives and learning these fine motor skills. How much of the day do infants spend engaged in this kind of diverse play? So that's what our assessors spend their time out looking for. The child care program earns points, and then where they fall on the point system is what determines their star rating. Right now, what we say is any star is a good star, because any child care program at this time that's voluntarily embracing this program is stepping up to quality and is really helping to raise the bar for what early learning looks like in Georgia. Right now, we're really lucky in that we have about 40% of all licensed childcare in the state working towards a star rating, and about 10% have achieved a star rating. And it's about a bell curve right now, about 115 programs at the 1-star, 250, 300 at the 2-star, and about the same amount on the 3-star side. But the great thing is that a star rating also isn't permanent. So we don't come out and rate you and then step away. What we want to see is the quality improvement, is we want every child care program, every child care provider in the state to reach that highest level of quality. So it's not like we come out, we say you're a 1-star, and then that's it, too bad. Is that next year we want to come back and see you at a 2-star or a 3-star, because we want all children to have access to that highest level.
Next question.
My child is now 17 years old, and I can remember we started with Shelter in Arms, and I thought that, you know, I didn't realize that you really couldn't afford to live and pay for child care. And Shelter in Arms made it affordable for us. I want to know, how did you do that? I mean, is there some type of supplement that, I mean, to be able to have a person come in at the rates that you come in at?
Let's see, I can talk a little bit about from the state perspective. I don't know if Drew has maybe something to add on top of that. So one of the other programs that our agency administers is the Child and Parent Services Program, which is the state subsidy for child care, which helps families who would qualify as working poor to be able to afford high quality early learning. One of the ways we help make it a little bit more affordable is we actually have a tiered reimbursement system. So if you are a child care provider, you can earn up to 10% more on the reimbursement you receive from the state if you get to that highest level of quality, that 3-star rating. But that's only a small part of the puzzle. One of the pieces that I'm really excited about, and as we think about kind of that sustainability conversation, is the Governor's Education Reform Commission, which has a huge task in front of it as it wrestles with issues around K-12 funding and teacher pay. But we are a big fan of a little sleeper subcommittee that's a part of the Education Reform Commission on early learning, which our Commissioner Amy Jacobs has been sharing, which has been wrestling with the pre-K funding formula. But part of the governor's charge to that subcommittee was also to look at how do we finance access to high quality early learning. So the pre-K conversation, the subcommittee will wrap up in May. We'll be spending the next 2 months looking at that issue. Some of the work I'm excited about from other states that we've seen that have helped make high quality early learning more affordable are some really creative tax credits and tax incentives. Louisiana is a state that's often held out as an example in this, which has made tax credits available to child care providers who achieve high levels of quality, because we know that costs. They've made tax credits available to the teachers who work in those birth through 5 settings that achieve high levels of quality to help sort of supplement their pay so that they stay, and also to parents and to families, so that if you pick high quality early learning, you could receive a tax credit for making that decision. So there's lots of really exciting work out there, and this is something that the subcommittee will be wrestling with over the next 2 months to make recommendations to the governor's office by August, so they would be included in the next session's budget for the state. So that's really exciting. Unfortunately, we don't have a good answer for it yet, but I would really encourage you to keep an eye out on those subcommittee meetings and help and provide your input about what are the barriers from the cost level on the family side.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sheena Shabazz with Matthew Health Service International. I would like to know, of course, the parent is the first teacher of the child, so how do you help to educate those parents who have had limited education themselves? Because I know just dealing with childcare myself with my children is very strenuous, not only on the parent, but on the teachers as well. So how do you help to educate those parents who are maybe have the lack of education?
I think one of the important things is, like we've talked about, been talking a lot of quality rated, what does quality look like? But understanding that they are going to school. I talk with a lot of parents in Clark County, and when I ask them what does quality care look like, they just say, listen, at the end of the day, when I pick my child up, I want them to be fed and I want them to be changed, and that's it, and that's success to them. But having to switch that and understand, like you said, that they are the teacher. I mean, I love that. I've been hearing that for years. I think it's spot on. But to understand that these first years, it's the foundation for everything that's going to happen later on. So we deal in Clark County a lot of times with high needs families that are very young. The parents are very young and may not have, we deal with a lot of high needs children and their parents as well. And so helping them understand what quality looks like, helping them understand the education aspect of the early years for a child is it's of the utmost importance.
And I would just piggyback on that and say, too, I think another great example of what's happening in that field is some of the great partnerships. I loved when Nicole was talking about community wellness, and to me, early learning is really the perfect example of where you can get the stock take of community wellness, because there are so many systems that intersect and crosswalk in those birth through 5 years. I am a big fan of some of the work our Department of Public Health is doing around the Talk With Me Baby campaign, which I think is a great example of that. Sometimes the early learning people aren't the best ones to be having a conversation about early learning with parents. And sometimes it's the pediatrician or it's the healthcare worker in the community who's the one that they're already going to, they already have a relationship with. And when your doctor tells you to do something, I usually do it, or at least I listen. And so a lot of the work that our Department of Public Health is doing with the partnerships with WIC and our other child and young mother serving agencies and programs in the state is just making the message really simple. We have to get into that more nuanced conversation about what does quality look like, what does a 1-star mean, but for your pediatrician just to tell you, talk with your baby, that just doing that is going to help them succeed and help them close that word gap. Now we've created a really digestible message that is very accessible to parents, whatever level they're coming from, and is delivered by someone who's very trusted already and already is someone they look to for advice. So I think as we think about how do we talk to all parents and talk to all families about the importance of early learning, we've got to get more creative with who our partners are, who the messengers are, what the message is, and we do definitely have a lot of bright spots around that in the state.
And also really quickly, within each E3Z, we have just set up a home visiting service through Great Start Georgia. And so these home visitors will go to these houses and work with these parents and help them with screenings and assessments and any social service that need be. So that's a huge resource in our communities with home visiting on actually stepping into, because, childcare, it's a variety of options. And home visiting is one of those options that works well with certain families. And so that is something within the E3Zs that we are just getting off the ground.
I would say for our community, when you look at this multidimensional approach and it's not just about education, but all these things working together, is that there are so many resources available to parents. So we have meetings at Drew where we're sharing what we're doing in the classroom with parents and showing them, why we do the things that we do. Education looked so different than it did when they were in the classroom. And so sometimes just giving them that information so they know what we're doing and why is helpful. And we can do that through the Eastlake Foundation, and the Villages of Eastlake provides ongoing education to the parents, and we do things at Drew. So there's so many different avenues for parents to get the information that they need to. So it's not, just this one place.
And I guess just maybe finally, at the corporate level, PNC partners with Sesame Street, Head Start, and the Fred Rogers Institute. And they've helped us to create kits, not only for the kids, but we sponsor family and learning nights in each of our major markets, where we talk about some of the many things that the other panelists have talked about today: the importance of reading with your child, the importance of exposing them to to the arts and the sciences, how to do that. And in addition to those kids, we also, for many of the things that we offer to the kids, especially as it relates to the arts, we also offer free access to the parents so they can experience that with the kids. And I do believe that helps with that engagement at home.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we are at the end of our time for the Q&A, but I encourage you, I think most of our panelists will be going on the tour, that if you have more questions for them, just corner them a little bit. I'm sure they'll be happy to continue to talk to you. But fortunately now, first I'd like to thank our panelists very much for really setting the stage for the tour that we are about to take. So we can see in real time with real little kids and in real schools about what we're really talking about here, and really sort of apply all of these things, and so you can understand what's going on. And so I'd like to take this time to introduce the head of Drew Charter School, Don Duran, who's going to talk to us about the tour and where we'll be going. So there's Don.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the YMCA and Drew Charter School. This is exciting, and first of all, I want to thank Steve and the whole Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. Without the great work they do here, this is the 11th one I've picked up. We really appreciate having a great thought partner with GPEE. I always look for how you've done your research and how you write it in such a thoughtful manner. So again, a great document for us that are really interested in this space. And taking the time today to focus on this really critical issue of early education. You've heard from the panel here, but I'm head of school, so there is an end game here. And that is to make sure that every child walks out of the 12th grade with wonderful post-secondary opportunities. But the truth is, if you start here instead of here, getting there is so much more difficult. And Nicole talked about our third graders reading to learn, because they've already learned to read early on. And so the way we do kindergarten here is totally different because of the great, wonderful opportunities our students have had in early education. Miss Barbara Preuss over there, who is the principal of the Elementary Academy, is proud of the fact that when we assess our kindergarten students on a national norm test, the ITBS, we hit the 88th percentile this year. Isn't that correct, Ms. Preuss? And so again, that just shows you that this early education is really important. Our students are on a different trajectory, and we're able to hold that trajectory up. And so we're very excited about the future of a Drew student. And it all starts with early education. It'd be remiss of me if I didn't call out some of the wonderful partners that have made it happen. I'm looking at Comer Yates back there with the Rollins Center that was so important of getting our Cox pre-K program started. Obviously, working with right from the start. Amy, thank you so much. You already called out Ms. White with Sheltering Arms, another wonderful partnership, and the Eastlake Learning Academy. All these partnerships makes Drew what Drew is. This is not your typical YMCA. Parrish Underwood, I don't see him in here, but he's the executive director of the Y. And I don't know how many Ys you go to that have kids playing in their gymnasium, the Drew students. We have early learning kids taking swimming in their swimming pool. This is really a wonderful community Y, and I wanted to just call out Parrish Underwood and thank him and the YMCA for the wonderful partnership we have that makes this work. But again, it's enough for us to talk about it. I think it's better to see it. So I'm going to ask Ms. Preuss to kind of tell you how we're going to divide up this wonderful group and let you actually see some of this early learning in action.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we could come on in and take a seat. And at this time, I'll ask the main man on campus here, Don Duran, please come back up. Don will be glad to answer your questions. This is like an informal debriefing, things that you've seen that you'd like to have some clarification on. And I know he's got his principal here so he can toss questions to her if they're too difficult. Don, thank you very much for letting us be here.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. I know you're all busy people, but if there are anything that you saw and you go, what was that? Or a little explanation, we'll be glad to try to address it. Yes, sir.
So the question was, what's your business plan? What's the economic mix of where your funding comes from?
Okay, a wonderful question. And remember, Drew Charter is a public school. So our funding comes from the FTE, just like how you fund public schools. So we're funded by Atlanta Public Schools. We're chartered by Atlanta Public Schools. And so everything you see, for example, is from the K through 12 across the school across the hill is funded in the public space. Now, pre-K, right from the start, as you know, is again, helps fund us, and we've been blessed to get a pretty significant grant from the Cox Family Foundation. So that's why it's called the Cox Pre-K. But our business model for the school from 8 to 4 is basically off the taxpayer local FTE count. And so the exciting thing about that piece, and I'm glad you asked that, is that it's realistic to think that this model can be replicated throughout the state, because we live on the public space dollar from 8 to 4.
Do you get extra funding because you're a charter school,
Okay.
or how does that work?
No, and I won't get too in the weeds about being a charter school. We always think we actually get a little less. But the truth is, again, the way public schools are funded, there are some, when you look at the categories of funding, some of it is based on percent of wealth. We're a low wealth school, so our Title I dollars money are there. We just like in a regular traditional school. We are funded, I can just tell you, last year we were funded at about 10.5 per student. And you can do the math. We know how much Atlanta Public School gets and how many students they have. It's about 14. So, you know, it's really, we live in that space. We have been very fortunate, though, I should call it out, to have written some pretty successful grants to answer your question. Especially when you look at the upper grades, we're technology rich. And we've been very successful writing some grants. One was we've actually got 2 Race to the Top grants, which has been very helpful, making sure that our STEAM program is really working at the highest level. We're project-based learning, and so it really helps us with engineering and technology and those types of things. But being a charter school is, you can actually say, where are the pressure points that we need to address, and that's where we throw our resources. And so, and I was with Atlanta Public Schools for many years. I understand the challenges of big districts, and you know, the whole issue, if you've got to standardize things for a host of reasons, and we can be really nimble. I think Nicole was talking about that. A lot of times we sit around the conference room and have great ideas, go implement them, and they go, whoa, it sounded good at the conference room. But we change it. So I'm not changing, you know, a battleship around here, you know, and how you changed, you know, 30, 40, 60 schools at one time. So it's allowed us to, I think, really refine and get our best practices that really work for this community. Yes.
2 questions. One is about when children start using computers and how. Excuse me. First question is, I apologize for the 2, is at what age and how children start actually using computers, because there's a lot of debate on that. And then I know you have to do the same standardized testing that's required, but when possible, do you do more or less of that?
Well, we try not to do more, because there is quite a robust state testing. But we do think it's important to say, in Atlanta Public Schools, we're an Atlanta Public School charter school, but we do a national norm test, and Atlanta Public School does not. So that is the one additional assessment we use. Now, we do some progress monitoring, like most good schools, you know, continuously. But when it comes to that type of assessment, the only one we use presently is ITBS, just to give us a benchmark on how we're tracking, nationally. Computers, you know, if you've ever seen a 2 or 3 or 4 year old, I mean, you know, they're on this. It takes them a second. I'm going to let Barbara Preuss talk about, we're very intentional when we bring in tablets, when we bring in laptops. The state's SOLs, student learning objectives, have kind of driven us to make sure that more laptops are available. But next year we'll have 500 devices, mobile devices in the elementary school.
No mic. Oh, no, I got. So for the longest time, we did not allow any technology into our pre-K program just because we wanted it to be about language and not about technology. However, we finally have succumbed, and they do now have smart boards in their room. We have a smart board in every classroom. We are a demonstration site for SMART. Our teachers really embraced the program, and so we have really intentional training for them. We used to have about 8 carts of netbooks. We'll have probably a little bit more next year of Chromebooks that can be pushed into any classroom, and we start as early as kindergarten for intentional type of technology.
And then we have our share of tablets, which is kind of a little different application and assessments. So one thing I should mention out is when she said we're a smart board demonstration site, is this is your commitment. When you say the word technology, I think the mistake schools make is, okay, how are you going to do technology? We actually have got the greatest person, wonderful instructor, and her total job was to make sure that technology was embedded into the instructional day. And so it's just not buying stuff, it's how you use that stuff in the instructional space. And when we talk about, we did a fair amount of PD, let me just give you an idea. You know, we required our teachers to go to an hour professional development twice a week for a year. So when we talk about, and SMART will come down out of Calgary, which is their headquarters, and say, we've never seen a school that utilizes our technology as well as you do. There's a lot of wonderful technology out there. That's really not the question. Is how do you really use it to enhance instruction and learning and assessing that learning and mastering that learning. So, you know, those two conversations need to be married up a little bit.
So currently in our technology lab, which is one of our enrichment classes, all of our children, kindergarten through 5th grade, rotate through that lab, and they are working on 21st century skills. We now know, because of all the testing that is kind of moving forward right now, that we need to be a little bit more intentional in providing some maybe typing skills and just basic skills early on. And so next year, we're talking about pulling our technology teacher out of our enrichment rotation and scheduling every single one of our classrooms in there at least once a week, possibly twice for our upper grades, to start that process a little bit more in a different way, beyond just learning those 21st century skills.
Yes.
I'm Katie Landis from the Georgia Statewide After School Network. I'm curious, one real basic question, what are the hours of your school day? Do they match your traditional school day? And then also, for those students who need it or want it, what do you do to make sure that all of them have access to enriching environments after the school day ends?
Great question. No, we don't have a normal traditional school day. Our school starts at 8 and ends at 4, whereas Atlanta Public Schools starts at 8 and ends at 2:30. We also start 5 days earlier to get a head and run start on all of the learning objectives. But in spite of that, we actually, because we serve a very low wealth community, we open our doors at 6:45 in the morning, and we have an extremely robust after school program that's, I can let Barb talk about it. We actually bring in an extra 30 staff members to run our after school program. As far as enrichment, it's embedded in the day, and also it's embedded in the after-school program. When we talk about enrichment, we have engineering design, harp, swimming, golf, physical education, foreign language, you know, technology. I could go on, we got 16 or 17 of them. So the idea is there's an opportunity gap when we talk about that in low-wealth neighborhoods, and I think Steve talks about it in his book. And so we want to expose our children to those opportunities. That's another part of it. We have a very significant, we serve the largest apartment complex left in Atlanta. And so we get kids that, don't have the benefit of coming through our wonderful pre-K, and there's a lot of catch-up. And we have a very extensive, let Ms. Preuss talk about our literacy center and our math center and our Saturday school, and I can go down the list, because that is the reality of working in a public space. Barb, you want to talk about that?
So in our after-school program, we have 1,000 children next door, and we serve approximately right now 400 children in our after-school program. We sort of discourage our classroom teachers from working in the after-school because it's a long day. However, some of them still work in our after-school, but we bring in vendors. Then, so there's a lot of academic focus for a couple days during the week, and then there's total enrichment for the rest of the week. And so it's intentional. They do a lot of project-based, so they kind of follow what we do. However, they're cooking, they're karate, they're dancing, they're drumming. All of those things are happening in our after-school program. During the day, we have 14 enrichment classrooms that we can rotate children through. Our interventions happen during that time as well, and so that's approximately about 70 minutes every single day. That provides us opportunity for professional development with our teachers, and at the same time, our children get to be involved in all of those areas during the day. We also do our interventions during that time as well. So I know all of you got the opportunity to pass our literacy center and our math labs. So those are very robust places that are really intentional teaching and explicit teaching around certain skills that children need. Hopefully, we progress monitor those children every week, and we hope every week we can dismiss all of them back out. However, that's not the case for some of them. Some of them have been in there for a while, and they're just slow learners, and it takes a little bit longer. But we make it fun. They really enjoy going. They're skipping and running to the literacy center and math labs. You would think they wouldn't, that they're missing music and PE and whatever else, but they really, really enjoy going to those places. And it's making a difference for us. Because of those areas, we're not identifying as many children into special ed. We're actually using that RTI in that time to not evaluate quite as many children.
And in spite of that, Ms. Preuss is here every Saturday, and we do Saturday school from 9 to 12 for those kids that.
Saturday.
If she's not, one of us is. So, but I mean, it is. There's not just a silver bullet out there. That's the point. It's you have to really add a lot of these things together. Testing's over with, so Ms. Preuss will have the last Saturday that she has to come.
I know throughout my years, one thing that I see a challenge, whether it's in a small daycare center all the way up to 12th grade, is parent involvement and parent engagement, and the struggle with that, especially as you said, we're in a low-wealth neighborhood. Can you talk a little bit about what you all do and what expectations are for the families?
Okay. Well, we are fortunate to have a really high parental involvement. We do conferencing 3 times a year, where, in fact, this Friday is one of our days, where we dismiss our children at 12 and do conferences with all of our parents during that time. I will say that, as a rule, back in the day when I went to school, kindergarten parents are there, pre-K parents are there, but once they get into 6th and 7th grade, gone, right? I mean, children, they're not there. But our parents are actually very active. We would probably have 95% of our parents involved in those conferences. We offer a real a variety of things that happen during the year. We have a really active PTA. They create spaces for parents to work on committees that are involved in sort of what we do in the school. We offer a STEAM day. We do fun and fitness days. We do all kinds of events that are sort of pulling children in. And we all know that a PTA meeting can be pretty dry if you're just doing business. So we generally have children performing. And so that brings them in. And so therefore you can get little points across, right? But I would say, obviously there are parents that are not involved, and we work hard to try to get them involved. But I would say the majority of even the low wealth parents are very involved. And I think it's because their children are involved in a very engaging curriculum and engaging school.
I just add one caveat to this, and I've been doing this a long time, and this question always comes up, and there's a lot of strategies to get parent involvement. The thing that I think we need to be careful as educators that ever use that as an excuse why kids aren't accessible, because I have low parent involvement. You know, we have kids from a long time under our care. And so I think, you know, it's just important that we recognize, and the research is out there, and I'm sure Steve can validate, that the best thing a parent can do is just say, from day one, talk about education, the important it is. It's really not about the spaghetti dinner. It's not about a lot of other things. And so, again, parent involvement, I think, is critical. It's helpful, but it's something that we have got to do. A lot of our parents, I mean, they're stressed. They work in 3 jobs. They got 3 hours at Walmart, 2 hours at McDonald's, you know, another hour, you know, at 7 o'clock in the morning at the Marriott, you know, and it's really hard. And we need to understand some of the challenges of poverty when it comes to what we traditionally think is parent involvement. So I think we just need to be careful when we throw around that term, not to use it as a reason or an excuse for kids not being successful. And I can see I'm getting the hook here, so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duran. We appreciate you hosting us here this morning and showing us firsthand what quality early education and education past the early years looks like. So I hope all of you enjoyed it. I know I did. As long as I've been working in state government in some capacity, I've never been to Drew, which is amazing because you hear so many great things about it. So I appreciate the firsthand tour and being able to see what happens every day in these schools and hearing from the leaders of the school and how they are intentional and work towards serving their community and the needs that are specific to their community. So again, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you attending this morning. I think it's been a great morning to hear about the importance of early learning. And keep this in mind as we talk about early learning. There are only 2,000 days between the time when a child is born until they enter kindergarten. So we can't waste a minute on providing that early learning. And also keep in mind that early learning is not just, it is important to build that foundation, but it's also a workforce and development and economic development tool. So thank you very much for being here and enjoy the rest of your day.